Let's get the ball rolling. Uh, Cameron, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started and involved in plotting and outlining books?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been writing on and off my whole life. I remember in first grade, my English class, I was writing a story instead of listening to the teacher. And the teacher came over and whacked me with the ruler. And like I got in trouble for writing a story. And I always feel like that's so ironic that like you should be, I don't know, engendering your students with wanting to write. She probably thought I was writing a note or a message, but I
Mm,
was writing my first novel. It was like 3 pages, but yeah, so I've been writing on and off my whole life. I've got 3 books published, and they are not bestsellers. I'm very much still learning the craft like the rest of you. But my day job is or was a software engineer. And one day I just kind of, after rewriting a book over and over, I'm like, man, I need a better process. And I kind of saw in my mind of what the best tool for me would be. And so I just started building it really. And as more and more people saw it, they're like, "Oh, I need that too." And so I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. People like what I built." And it's just started spreading. So in 2020, I was able to quit my job and do this full time. And so now I help writers all day and build software to help them.
that's so awesome. What genre are the books that you wrote?
So two of them are young adult sci-fi fantasy. One's more like fantasy, one's more sci-fi, and then one of them's like a Indiana Jones treasure hunt novel.
Is there a specific problem that you were having with writing those books where you're like, I can't I can't do this. Like I need to have this organized in a different way because like I'm having trouble solving the problem of getting this character from point A to point B or something along those lines?
Yeah, definitely. So there's two things. One, my notes were everywhere. When I'd come up with an idea on the go, I'd put it in my phone or on a napkin or something like that. I mean, the first book that I wrote, I don't think I had a smartphone. It was 2010. So, like my notes were just everywhere and it was so hard to keep them organized. And as I'd be brainstorming, my ideas would change. And so even if I did know where the note was, it might not be what I actually meant for the story right now. It might have been like 3 versions ago or 3 drafts ago or something. So that was one big thing, keeping my notes organized. And a second one is I just had a hard time like keeping all the threads of the story in a way that made sense to me. I just like I felt like there should be a way to see the threads of your story like weaving together, like um like in a visual way. And so that was the other thing I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, it is interesting and fun and cool to see like visualizations of those plots over time and stuff like that. You know, I've seen lots of I don't know if I don't know if you've ever seen oh gosh, there's a time travel movie. And anyway, it's like here there's a meme where it's like here's a normal plot and it's got these characters moving, you know, it's got like 3 lines or 4 lines or whatever, and
Yeah.
they like sometimes cross each other. And then it's like here's gosh, I want to say it's like called the Prime or something. But anyway, it's like the line just started there's looks like spaghetti.
Is that is
Um
just to sidetrack us for a second, is that where like these guys make a time machine and go back in time to stop each other?
yeah. Like something along those lines. Because like
Really low budget movie.
the plot is quite confusing because they also have to like when they go back in time, like their second, like their original self still exists, and then they have to like get rid of them.
Yes, I
Uh,
think I've seen that movie. Yeah, that's
yeah,
wild.
yeah.
That would be very confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, pretty funny. But yeah, like so one of those key parts of having your plot laid out is having that sort of those timelines of the different characters and interactions. Can you give us also just what are some other key elements when authors are plotting or lining their books, some elements that they would want in that outline?
Yeah, so um it's not just a plot line or a subplot. There's also um each one of your characters, hopefully, and not every character, but a lot of your characters or some of your characters at least are going to be changing. And so tracking those changes over time and they're not just like all the way I think of it is like their attributes. So maybe their courage, for example, the main character. His courage is changing over time, but that's not the only thing that's changing. Maybe his internal conflict is changing over time. So each there can be multiple things about one character, and there's relationships about characters, there are different setups and payoffs, there's the theme of your story, all those kind of things. And hopefully that's not feeling overwhelming. Because if you do it right, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You just kind of layer it in slowly. But but yeah, all those things I think really add just a little piece to your story, a little layer, an extra layer that makes it more realistic, more powerful, more meaningful. And so each one of those things is important to have, I think.
I think what you said there is really interesting because you do story is so much about character arcs, right? And people changing over time, and that is what makes great story.
Yeah.
When an author sits down to start an outline though, or start to plot, what are some of the things that they should have that they're thinking about when they're getting started? Because obviously they will need those various elements like character, setting, all that stuff. Um, what's the that process look like? Would you recommend, like, do you need to pick your setting first? Do you need to have a cast of characters laid out? Do you need to, or is it sort of just you just develop it naturally as you kind of tinker with things?
Yeah, so I wish there was an easy answer that I could just give everybody, but I don't feel like there's any shoulds in writing. Like there's I do it this way and this works for me, or I do it this way and it doesn't work for me. And so what's a better way? But I don't think there's any one size fits all. For each one of you, it's going to be very different process. I can tell you what I do, and again, I've never
Yeah.
written a bestseller yet, but for me, it's like it really depends on where the inspiration comes from. But usually I'll just have bits and pieces, and there's this kind of like brainstorm stage where a lot of just disjointed ideas start slowly coming together. But there's a lot of pieces that are missing. And so I'll just kind of write those down and make sure I don't forget them because I've got 6 kids um, and we're always busy with things. So it's very easy to forget little details like that. So I gotta write everything down. Um, and then then there's this kind of second step where your brainstorm ideas start kind of coalescing and making sense and they come together a little bit more. And sometimes I start writing then. Sometimes I should start writing then, and I don't, because I really want to nail the story and get it good before I do anything. But it really depends. And there's sometimes you get a character first, like that is your inspiration, or you already know the main character, or sometimes you know the world that it's in, like the magic system or something, but you don't know what what would make for a good story in that magic system, in that world. So there's no like defined process.
No
Uh,
right way to
but
go about it.
yeah, and for me, it's like I'll usually I'll I'll start writing and then I'll know kind of 2 or 3 scenes ahead of where I'm writing, and I'll be able to plot that out or plan that out, or at least have kind of a general idea and write that down. And then as I'm writing, it's kind of every couple scenes the next couple scenes after I get to those. So after I get to the scenes that I was thinking about when I start writing those, then I'll get a couple more scenes ahead of that coming to me. And but it depends. Sometimes I know the climax right away and I'm like, gotta get to the climax. How do I get to the climax? That kind of a thing. So
Got it. Got
maybe
it.
a long-winded answer, but
Kids though are not helpful for sleeping, and sleeping is what you need to keep your memory working. So writing things down is definitely important.
yeah.
And uh and I was gonna ask, because there's no right way to plot, and I feel like this is something that is talked about often among authors, is like people telling people, well, they need to plot their books or outline their books or what have you. In some authors, it works for them, and some authors are more just discovery writers, and that works as well. I'm curious, do you have any stories from authors that maybe were more discovery writers and then introduced a little bit of plotting into their works, like, and maybe why, or did that work for them? Or
So I can actually speak to that a little bit, and then give some stories. So there's actually advantages to both sides. So to being a discovery writer, for those that are discovery writers, usually their characters are more dynamic, they're more realistic, but their endings are usually weaker. They just kind of end, and you don't really know if you've hit the end. And a lot of times the middles are what they call saggy. You know, the middles are kind of blah. Whereas people who plot more, they tend to have better endings, like more of a pow, more of a good ending, but their characters are usually more robotic, meaning that they just do what they have to do because the plot says they have to do that. And so it maybe not doesn't make sense for their character, or there is no reason for that character to do that, but they have to do it because the plot says they have to do it. So there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to either. So I would say like find what's good for you, and don't try and like don't talk yourself into saying I should be this or I should be that. Um, but you can also take where you're weak and learn ways to help you with that. So there's this one lady that we worked with recently, actually, and I have a direct quote from her. See if I can post it in here. So she actually, this doesn't necessarily talk about Plottr to Pantser, or Pantser to Plottr, but she said that this app has been a game changer for me and it probably saved my writing career. She said that her middle was sagging, and she always does this. She's like, I always do this. I get 25,000 words in and I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. And so when I started using Plottr, it just helped me out so much, because she was able to figure out what was going wrong in her story and figure out a plan for the rest of it. And I found that a lot of pantsers often are pantsers because writing an outline is boring. And you it well, that's one reason. Another reason is you want to discover the story, as like the whole point of writing the story is to discover it. And once you've discovered it, it's kind of like the fun, the magic is over because uh already you've already figured out the story, you've already heard the story once, and so it's not as exciting. So they don't want to plan it beforehand, and then have to tell it twice, kind of thing. um, but with Plotter, because it's so visual, we've heard so many people say, oh, this is the way my brain works, this is the way I actually do this. And so they're able to either put down some like tent pole events, or like, okay, I know what the climax is going to be, I know what the inciting incident is going to be, write those down, and then you can discovery write the rest and get from point A to point B and discovery write that. But at least you have an idea of where you're going and you can kind of guide yourself. Or when you do get stuck, we have a bunch of templates that can kind of give you ideas and help you work through that saggy middle and figure out what needs to happen next. Um, and so a couple strategies there, if you let me keep rambling here a little bit. So for pantsers, we found that one way that they can do it that's really helpful for them is to use Plottr after your daily writing session. So let's say you have an hour that you write in or something like that. So you write for 55 minutes and take the last 5 minutes to write in Plottr what you wrote for the day. Just like a quick summary of this is what happened. Maybe write down any of the characters that you discovered or that you came up with for the day. So that's one strategy. And that way, when you're done with the first draft, you also have this visual depiction of your story. And because the next step is editing, and no matter if you've plotted the story beforehand or written the first draft without an idea, you're always going to have to go back and edit, cut things out, move things around. And so you'll have that visual storyboard to be able to move things around. So that's one strategy. The second strategy for pantsers is, after you write the first draft, to import that first draft into Plottr, and we make our best guess at where things should be in different plot lines and characters and things like that. But then you're able to tease that apart and really put the details on the timeline. And then the third strategy is what I do, which is kind of have this rolling outline of plotting a few steps ahead of where you're writing. And that tends to work for a lot of, like, everybody has a different process, right? And I'm amazed by how many different ways there are to do it, but that's been really helpful for me. I don't think they want me to tell you, but a certain book that was written in a galaxy far, far away was struggling a couple years ago, and they discovered Plottr. And the editor came back and told me, "Thank you so much for Plottr. This saved the book." Um, so don't go around spreading that. But yes, we saved a galaxy far, far away from utter destruction, and I'm very proud of that.
That's so cool. Yeah, I would imagine that, especially if you have like a co-author or something like that, where you're thinking more in like a writer's room, or you have like a group of writers working on something, that having having one place to act as sort of the repository for all the ideas and outline would be quite helpful. I'm tempted to also use the word story Bible. Is there a difference between a story Bible and an outline or a plot?
The outline is what actually gets written, whereas a story Bible is all the details, whether they make it to the story or not. It's all the details that you can imagine, all the backstory, all the, you might not ever say the eye color of a certain character, but maybe it's important to you, or maybe that's just how you picture them. Maybe you go online, you Google Steve Carell. I don't know why that name came to me, but Steve Carell, and that's your main character, and so you've got a picture of Steve Carell, and maybe, you're not going to say in your book, this guy looks like Steve Carell, but so it's all those important details for you as the author. And let me tell you, when you start, I don't know what step in the process you guys are at, whether writing your first book, or you've written a couple books or published a few, but when you start writing series, you've got two, three, seven books, in one series, you're going to get emails from writers, and they're going to tell you, why'd you change the eye color of so and so? He was my favorite character. I love that his eyes were green and now they're blue. I hate that. Why'd you change that? And that's just going to happen. I've heard from so many authors that happens. And but if you have a story Bible that's organized, you're able to look back easily at all those little details, because that one character in the first book, that little side character who you want to bring into a bigger position in like book 7 or something, you're not going to remember about. And you don't have to read your whole series again to be able to rewrite each book or to write the next book in the series. So having those details easily searchable, easily somewhere organized, it's really going to change when you start writing a series. It's going to help you so much in the long run. So
Can Plotter act as that story Bible for those kinds of details as well?
yeah, that's its second great purpose. The first one is visualizing your story, and the second one is being that series Bible for you.
Awesome. Could we actually take a look at some of this stuff? Because we've been talking about how Plotter really helps authors visualize things. And so it'd be
Let's
great
visualize
for
it.
us
Yeah.
to visualize it. Um, and you had mentioned earlier something as well about Plotter having a lot of great templates and things for authors who are struggling with like that sagging middle, as you were talking about as well.
Yeah.
So, while you're getting that set up there, I also wanted to be thinking about, are there particular structures that you find are most helpful to authors when it comes to plotting? Do you recommend, the 3-act structure, or the, XYZ other framework? There's so many of them out there. Um,
Yeah.
and then maybe how those are also integrated with Plotter as well.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I can show you those things. So I've got this is the timeline in Plotter, and let me know if you can't see the screen, but this is the main screen in Plotter, and this is where you're going to visually arrange your story. So you've got your scenes across the top here. You can have as many as you want. And then you got your different plot lines or character arcs or bits of their character changes, relationships, things like that, that will change over time throughout your story. And this is the story of the Three Little Pigs. It's just a demo that I use often because it's a simple story almost everybody knows. I've got a kind of a simplified version of it that I will show you. Um, so you can see a simpler version first. So we've got the wolf here and a line for each one of the pigs, and they leave home for the big world, right? They leave their mother pig's barn and they start building houses. So pig one builds a house out of straw, then house or pig two builds a house out of sticks, and then pig three out of bricks. And then the wolf comes by and he starts blowing down houses, and we know the story. But something we don't think about a lot is this wolf here, and why is he there? Like, we don't know anything about him. What is his motivation? Why is he there? Is he on a drunken bet with his buddies? Or is he trying to feed his starving kids? Like that matters for the end of his story. And also, why does he climb up the chimney? Why is he so determined to get these pigs? That matters for his story. And if you have to read 50,000 words in your outline or something, or if you have to read your manuscript often, it's going to be so hard to pick out those details and make sure you're not missing little things. So same thing for the pigs here. We've got kind of a plot hole. What are they doing when their brother's house is being blown down? Are they laughing at him? Are they trying to help him? Are they saying, "You idiot, come here, come on, get away. I told you not to make a straw house. What a dummy." That matters for the end of their character arc. So this helps you to visually see that. And so that's one aspect of it. Let me show you, go back to this alternate version of it so you can see in depth. So I've added a little bit more to the wolf story, and I won't go through all of this, but he's got a backstory now. He lost his job and he's just sitting at home on his couch watching TV. His wife says, "Go find us some food or else," and so that's why his three kids are starving or whatever. And so that's why he does this. And so I've given him kind of a character arc. And also I've deepened here the pigs here. So pig three, his courage changes over time. And so you could do that with like a plus 10, minus 25 kind of thing, or just some words here. He's unsure, and then he grows a little, then he grows more, that kind of thing. And also their relationship changes over time. So I've just added this to them. Like, maybe the reason they left home is because their relationship was falling apart. And then when they're building houses, each one thinks, "Oh, what an idiot. He built a straw house, built a brick house." But then they end best friends because they had a first huge success together. And so each one of these things is just a layer, just a small layer. And I did this in like 10 minutes. And this is just a simple story. It's not a great example, but in 10 minutes, I added like four more layers to these characters and was really able to give more depth to this simple little story. And now it's kind of a cool story of like the villain is really trying to save his family, and the heroes are really trying to figure out their brotherhood and themselves and things. So um, doing it visually like this really helps you. So that's one thing. The other thing you wanted to see was the story Bible. So there's or the series Bible. Those are kind of interchangeable here, but so there's this area for all your character notes. And so you can see all the characters for your whole series in one place, and you can have as much room to write about them as you want. There's different templates in here for the characters for like goal, motivation, conflict. There's a funny one that I love, this online dating profile. So you can have an online dating profile for the wolf here. Or if you're writing a romance, that could be really valuable for you. But there's also a bunch of templates like we've got a fun one for a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet,
Oh,
or
nice.
yeah, the Rorschach ink blot test. We have the actual ink blots in here so you can see those. And then a
Oh,
bunch of
funny.
personality tests like the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, and the other big one. What is that? No, I think I've already got it in here. The disc, yeah, the disc personality profile and so forth. So also a magic one. So there's just a lot of templates built in that'll help you get deeper in your characters. Um, but I will caution you that that can be a kind of a rabbit hole of wasting time. So I would say don't like dig too much into your characters and never write the story.
Right.
Make sure you get to the writing the story, because some authors do that. But so you have a room for all your characters, all your places in the story. You could have maps, you could have planets and worlds and things like that. And then notes for like backstory, brainstorming, world building, magic systems, any of that kind of stuff. So those three become your series Bible. And um, to explain a little better that it's your whole series and not just one story. So in each Plottr project, there's room for all your books. So we've got the Three Little Pigs, and we've got the alternate version of the Three Little Pigs that I made, and then book two, The Wolf Strikes Back, and book three, The Return of Mother Pig. And so each one of these has its own separate timeline, and you can easily switch between them. And so we'll go back to the Three Little Pigs. That's the one you saw originally. And you also have a series view for a bird's eye view of the whole series. And this is, I just love this. So it's as if each book were one chapter in a bigger story. So the Three Little Pigs, book one, and then we've got book two and book three. But in between that, there's some important things in these characters' arcs. So the wolf maybe hatches a plan in between book two and or book one and book two. And pig three, he gets prideful and he starts hunting wolves. But that becomes his downfall. And in book two, the wolf humbles him. And then maybe book three decides to dedicate his life to serving his mother. He realizes that's a higher purpose than himself or something. So you can track this character arc throughout the whole series of a character. So those are, I don't know if I answered your questions, Evan, but those are, you wanted to see um, templates. That was the other big thing. That was the
Yeah.
other. So we've got a bunch of templates built into Plottr, and these are just really awesome for a lot of different reasons. So we've got like mystery, got a few mystery ones. We've got romance. That's the one I was looking for. We've got a couple romance, like romancing the beat. That's a really big one in romance. And for action, oh, I know mystery is the one the 12-step mystery formula. That's another big one. And then of course the hero's journey. That's another big one. So when you add these, it adds the beat of so the hero's journey here has 12 beats or parts or pieces to it, right? How many of you have the hero's journey memorized and all the beats? I'm gonna guess just about zero, even though that's our craft, right? That and not everybody has to know the hero's journey. There's a bunch of different structures, but if you're a carpenter, I bet you know like how to add 1/4 to 7/8 or something like that, but these are the tools of our trade, the hero's journey, the romancing the beat, and I don't have it memorized. But Plottr makes it so that you don't have to have them memorized. It does that hard work for you. So it's like the application of those mythology or the theory of these different story structures. This is the application of it. And not only does it have the name of the beat in there, but it has a whole wealth of information on each one of these. So this will tell you, what does the refusal of the call mean? Oh, so it gives you kind of a summary of what it should be. It tells you about where in the story it should be, about 15%. Not that you have to follow that exactly. Don't get worried about that. But so then let's say you can't remember what approaching the inmost cave is or the ordeal. You're able to look at these and it guides you. And so the reason I said they're so powerful, because if you already are familiar with one of these processes, like the romancing the beat, the 12-step mystery formula or something like that, this is almost paint by number for writing your story. And I don't want to simplify it to that because every story it takes a lot more creativity than that, but it makes it just so much faster for you. But if you aren't familiar, if you're just learning to write or trying to learn a new genre, or you want to have like a mystery subgenre or a romance subgenre, or sorry, not a subplot or a mystery subplot, then this will give you the pieces already. So it'll teach you how to write a mystery subplot or how to write a mystery story, and it will guide you and hold your hand along the way to be able to write the story. So these templates are so powerful. Somebody had a question I see about a template for fantasy or portal fantasy or light fantasy. We don't have a direct one for portal fantasy, but for fantasy, I'm trying to think. Hero's Journey is definitely one that's used a lot for fantasy, um, or like the heroine's journey. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to think of some other ones for fantasy. Action adventure.
I
That's a good
would
one.
I would guess that most fantasy authors would probably look to something like the hero's journey,
Yeah.
and then use that as sort of a starting point. Because I'm not aware of anything that gets super specific when it comes to plotting, um, like frameworks for plotting within like a very specific niche or anything like that. I read a lot of lit RPG, and I'm not aware of any like, frameworks for here to plot like a lit RPG. Now, there's definitely things like here are tropes that you would want to make sure that you include
Yeah.
in, this genre, like, the character's stats or their progression, or like usually there's, stuff about like martial arts schools like sects and that kind of stuff. Uh, and I'm curious as well, like, is there anything along those lines of like uh things of like what tropes might be uh in your book, or things that you would want to include into your outline that's in Plottr, or is that something where authors would look elsewhere, or that would just come from their own reading of the genre and sort of just knowing what's popular in the genre?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have anything about tropes. But I did. So last year I met this lady. People call her the trope lady. She's written a few books about tropes in different genres. I'm blanking on her name right now. But so I was talking to her and I was like, I think that would be perfect in Plotter, some sort of like template for like what kind of tropes do you need in a romance, or what kind of tropes do you
Right.
need in horror. And so we're things have kind of stalled for now, because I've been working on some other things, but we're in talks about making like a trope template, or different tropes for different genres, and figuring out how it'll work in Plotter, because I think you're right that that would be super valuable. What kind of tropes should I add for this story?
We also got a question here from someone else that asked, because this, a lot of times authors are using something like Scrivener to do a lot of this stuff in as well. Does Plotter integrate with Scrivener, or is this sort of or is this something that authors would mostly use in conjunction with, Word or Google Docs or whatever else, and they would um, this sort of competes with what they might otherwise do in Scrivener or something like that.
Yeah, great question. So I still use Scrivener. Um, but you're welcome to use whatever writing tool you want. But in Plotter, you don't actually write your manuscript. It's just meant for visualizing your story and keeping the series Bible. Um, and and so you can actually export from Plotter to either Word or Scrivener, and when you do, it already has your outline. It already has everything that you've put in there. You can customize that, of course. So if you don't want your characters exported or something like that, but a lot of people will like export it to Word and have their characters and everything exported. So it's just like a separate copy just in case, or they'll print it out because they like seeing having a physical thing next to them as they write. Um, or just like in case their computer blows up, or the internet just blows up or something. So yeah, you can definitely do that. And let me show you what it would look like in Scrivener. I'll just export it to Scrivener and open that up here. So when I do that, it asks me, so it is exporting to Scrivener 2, but Scrivener just updates that automatically for you. So that's what was going on here. But you'll see that it already has um, my my outline already in here from what you saw in Plotter. And when you click on each one of these, you see the cork board. And so it's got like, so here's your main plot. And if I click onto that, it's got your notes from Plotter already in here. So this is what I wrote there in the scene card in Plotter. And it says that it's on the main plot and what characters are there and stuff like that in this little inspector that you see in Scrivener, if you're familiar with that. So yeah, you can go from Plotter to writing your manuscript in just a couple clicks. You saw that it took me a few seconds to export it, and then if I click on this thing, then boom, I can just start writing, and my notes are right here from Plotter. Um, and also you can dive into each one of these if you wanted to, and just click from there. But and of course you can customize what gets exported. So if you only want the main plot and so forth. And then Word is similar. Let me open up Word here. So here's Word. And if you look, it already does the nice little outline in Word for you. So I've got my
Oh,
notes
interesting.
here, and it's got all the images that I put in there and like my characters. And here's my outline. And so I can dive into that, and like here's chapter 1, here's chapter 5, for example. And so I've got some of the notes printing out here, but you don't have to export these notes. You could just export the title, and then you just start writing. And so Plotter really tries to get you to write, get you to get writing as fast as you can. We don't want you to get in some uh I'm plotting for 10 years, or I can't pull the trigger or something. I've met people like that. And honestly, on one of my books, I think I've been doing that a little bit too much. I need to just pull the trigger and start writing, but that's the idea.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask that as well. What is your advice for authors who struggle with overplotting versus underplotting? Like how do you know when enough is enough?
Um, I'm still learning that, but I think um for me, the point with this current story that I'm working on was when I already had an outline and I already mostly plotted it out, but I didn't feel like it was perfect. And so I kept going back to the drawing board. And that was kind of the signal to me after doing that for a little too long. I was like, I think I just need to write this. And so to be honest, I made this tool Plottr for writers, and then I don't write as much as I used to. I made it for
Right.
myself, and I don't write as much as I used to. So I haven't gotten to writing it yet, but as soon as I sit down to write next, that's what I'm going to start doing is writing it because I kind of been going back and forth on this, and I feel like, especially being a software engineer, and you'd probably understand this, Evan, that um, the problem isn't understood until the solving of it. So you have to, at
Right.
least for me, you have to get your hands in the problem. And when I mean problem, like get your hands in the story. And that's when you're going to understand the story. And so for me, I think there's this kind of give and take of come up with some ideas and then stop and start writing. And then you'll understand the problem better. You understand the story better, and then you can do some more ideation, more brainstorming, and then write again. That happens a lot with code. Like you don't understand until you get in there solving it, what the problem actually is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's a I mean I usually have a fairly similar process. I'll outline a feature, right? Like here's the database tables that I'm gonna create. Here's the
Yeah.
different columns and here's the functions that I'm gonna write. But then as you go through and actually start to flesh that stuff out, you realize, oh, I didn't think about this piece. Actually, I'm gonna need to have this other column on the date, like on the table, or I'm gonna need to create an entirely another table that's also gonna store some of this information here or whatever, right? So there is definitely that experience where you outline something, then you start actually working on it, and you realize your outline doesn't cover all the bases. And I think it is if your outline does truly cover all of the bases, then you've spent probably too much time on your outline.
Yeah.
Like, um, I forget who said it. I think it was but something along the lines of like if you're not embarrassed by your product at launch, then you didn't launch early enough.
Huh.
Uh
Interesting.
like the first version should be you should get to it as quickly as possible. Now, not all things between software and writing books are
Sure,
comparable.
but there is
Uh,
something that
but yeah,
translates there. You don't want to spend 10 years on your first draft and never publish it,
yep,
So the first draft, I luckily you don't have to publish the first draft, and
right,
maybe that's the
exactly.
difference between software and writing. You don't publish that first draft, but get it into people's hands, let them read it, get some feedback, find out where it's good, read through it yourself, things like that, and then
Get
go
some
back
beta
and
readers. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I know a service that helps with getting feedback from beta readers called
I've
Story
heard.
Origin.
I think I've heard of something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I will throw a quick mention of there for authors that are like trying to get feedback on beta copies and stuff like that. The interesting feature with Story Origin there is readers have to leave feedback on each chapter to unlock the next chapter. So, if you have not tried this out, Cameron, and you're looking to get feedback on your book, check it out.
Yes.
Because yeah, readers have to leave feedback. It's better than like you give a reader the entire manuscript and they say that was great, and then you go, okay, and
Yeah,
um,
that's awesome. When I write my book, when I sit down and finally write it, I will do that.
well, here's what you do. Some authors they'll write their books in like I've seen this with a few authors that do Kindle Vella, where they will write and publish a chapter at a time via Story Origins beta copies feature and get feedback on each chapter. And then and then their readers are almost kind of helping them write the story because they're, leaving comments like, "Oh, what's going to happen between these two characters?" And that sparks ideas for you too as well, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's cool.
but we have another question here that I want to get to. Someone asked, can you export from Plottr to InDesign?
Yeah, so I don't think so. The only way that could be possible is if it accepts, if you can import a Word document into InDesign. So you could export from Plottr a Word document and then import that Word document into InDesign. And as long as that works, then yeah, you could do it.
Yeah, Word docs are kind of a universal.
Exactly. Yeah.
They've become a sort of de facto standard for importing and exporting things between different writing softwares. So like you can, I'm not sure if it's exactly how the export to Scrivener function works, but like a lot of authors will export things from a Word doc and import those into Scrivener. I don't know
Yep.
if under the hood, it's just that Plottr is exporting it to a Word doc, which then is what Scrivener is actually ingesting. Is that it?
No, we go directly
No.
to
Okay.
Scrivener. Yeah, we've figured out their file, the way they, they have this whole like project folder and file system and stuff like
hmm
that. So we go directly to that. But yeah, that might have been an easier first step to do it that way. But
yeah. Scrivener does have a little bit of an interesting file structure that's different from other stuff.
yeah.
Um, I I wanted to ask, since we were also talking about overplotting versus underplotting, what are some other common mistakes that you see when authors are outlining, and how can they avoid making those mistakes?
So one thing that I see is trying to fit some other person's process, or you heard online that so and so does this process, or you follow this one writer that you love and he has this process, or she's taught you to do it this way, and not making it fit your process, or find something that works for you. I've tried so many things and it's never what other people do. And that kind of frustrates me because I would think that, I'll talk to someone, I'm like, man, I've never seen somebody use Plotter this way, or even the way that you write your stories is amazing. That feels like that's what I need to do. That's why my books aren't right. And then I'll try that and it's not right, or it's close, but I need to change it for my own circumstances. So I would say don't try and fit somebody else's writing process. Find what works for you and be willing to accept that that's just different for you, and find what works for you. That's one thing for sure.
Yeah, that is so important. That goes back to the whole sort of, you know, discovery writing versus plotting, all that kind of stuff. It's everyone's process is unique and different, and doing one thing one way is not going to work for everybody for sure.
But
Um,
I guess the flip side to that, though, is if you know that your process isn't working, be willing
yeah.
to make changes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And since we're talking about other softwares and integrating with things like Scrivener or InDesign, etc., uh, when it comes to other platforms that are similar to Plottr in terms of helping authors plot, what sets Plottr apart? What makes it different from other things?
Yeah. So um, a lot of other software will is usually focused on writing the manuscript of your story. Whereas in Plotter, you don't write the manuscript. And so that's the big differentiator, because we're trying to be really good at a few small things and not do everything for every writer. So still keep your Scrivener, keep your Dabble writer, keep your whatever Word document or Google Docs, whatever you're currently using to write your story. We're not trying to replace that. And because if we did, there'd be a million feature requests for, oh, do lists and do all these different things, compile it to a EPUB and those kind of things. So, but we're trying to be really good at visualizing your story and being able to not keep everything in your head and get it out there. So we're trying to do almost as little as possible so that it can be really good at that.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes when a piece of software becomes a Swiss Army knife, it becomes more complex. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So, what platforms is Plotter available on? Can I use it on a PC, Mac?
Yeah, so it's yeah, Windows and Mac computers, also in a web browser. So there's a couple different ways you can use Plotter, and we've done this flexibly because a lot of writers um, are very different in the way that they access their software or how they care about it. So one way is to do it where everything's on your computer and it's files stored on your computers like a Word document, like a Scrivener project. It's nowhere in the cloud, and nobody will ever take your story if that's what you're worried about. But we also have a way where you can use Plotter, where it's stored in our cloud and things magically sync between devices, and you can collaborate with other writers very easily. So that's two different ways. The one in the cloud we call Plotter Pro, and the one that's just on your computer and everything stored on your computer we call just Plotter. And so just Plotter will work on Mac and Windows, but Plotter Pro will work. You can download it Mac on your Mac and Windows, or you could use it in a browser or like an iPad or something like that. So it's the Pro version especially is pretty flexible. And it's the nice thing about that is it's backed up to the cloud. So in case your computer blows up, you don't have to worry about it and those kind of things. So
Gotcha. And is there a difference in cost between, presumably there's a difference in cost between sort of the Plotter, I'm gonna call it Plotter Basic.
okay. Yeah.
Between Basic and Plotter Pro.
Yeah. So Plotter Basic, we'll call it that. Plotter what's the term that they use? The original flavor. Plotter
Yeah,
original
yeah, yeah.
flavor.
Plotter Original. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Plotter Original.
there we go. That is you can either pay $200 to have it for life, or you could pay $60 a year. And as long as you're subscribed, you get updates and new features. Whereas the lifetime, you get that for life. You get updates and new features for life. And then the Pro, you can either pay monthly or annually, and it's either $15 a month or $150 a year. Hopefully, I'm saying the right price there.
Let's say someone comes up with a question later and they're like, "Oh man, I really wish Evan had asked that, or I wish I'd posted that in the chat." How would authors get in touch with you or get an email to Plotter?
Yeah. So um, our support team is awesome. We have actual people that answer, and I know Evan answers you guys' responses or questions with story origin, and we've got a couple a power couple or this awesome couple that live in Oregon. It's a husband wife team, and I just love them to death. They're such great people. They are so good to writers. They're writers themselves, and they really take care of people. So if you ever have a question, just email us support@plotter.com, or go to a plotter.com/support and you can send in a ticket. But either way, they'll take care of you. They usually respond within a day, but sometimes it's even faster. And sometimes it's more because if we get a lot of questions, but they're just really awesome, really nice people, and they'll take care of you. If you want to get on a Zoom with them, they'll get on a Zoom for like an hour and
Oh,
talk you
awesome.
through it, which is I think really unheard of for most support for software. So they're just really awesome. And I do see a question about being able to try it out before purchasing. And yeah, so there is a really long trial. So it's a 60-day trial. So plenty of time to try it out. We're actually changing that pretty soon to a 30-day trial. We think that was too much for people and they never ended up getting it. And so that's not good for us either. But so if you get it now, you have 60 days to try it out before we change that.
If people just want to like learn more about Plotter 2, are there other places that authors ought to check out?
I will put a couple in the channel here. So plotter.com and then youtube.com/plotter. We've got a channel there with it's really awesome because we have a bunch of videos that are like 2 minute, how do you do this in Plotter type videos. And then there's some that are longer, deep dives of this is how this author does it. And maybe this way makes more sense to you. And it's crazy. Everybody does it differently. And it's so flexible for people. So we'll have a deep dive of like this author will say, this is my process, this is how I work Plotter into it. And so maybe you'll find a way that makes sense for you and really helps your process that you wouldn't have thought of without watching that person. So we have both kinds of videos there.
Yeah, I think being able to follow along and see how someone actually does their own process and being able to see that from a few different people. And I mean, I personally watch a lot of stuff on YouTube at 2x speed.
Yeah. Yep.
And just
Exactly.
just like just getting all of those different perspectives, it can be quite helpful sometimes. So that is a super cool resource for authors to check out as well.
Mm.
And I think we're all out of time here as well. We've got 1 minute left. So I'll just say thank you to everyone who came today for hanging out with us. If anyone has any questions on Plottr, again, check out plottr.com. And if anyone has any questions on Story Origin, feel free to email me, Evan at storyoriginApp.com, or visit storyoriginApp.com as well. And we will see you all in the next one. Thanks again for coming to hang out with us.